The opposite kind of policy is a contractionary fiscal policy. So contractionary fiscal policy. And so contractionary fiscal policy is just going to be the opposite of what we just said. So this is decreasing government spending, right? So decreasing government spending or increasing taxes. So a decreasing government spending or increasing taxes is going to be a contractionary fiscal policy. So how does this work? Let's go through the two sides again. So if we look at the decrease in government spending, well, this directly decreases aggregate demand, and there's also a multiplier effect, because the people who would normally have received this spending from the government, like for example government workers, now they get laid off. Then there's also a multiplier effect because we also have a decrease in spending from those who would have received this, right? If this government spending had been done, they would have received this, and now they get less income, less wages, less revenue, and then they also spend less, right? So we get this. So this causes, we can say this one causes a further decrease in aggregate demand. Okay, so there's kind of a first decrease and then another decrease. And this was the same thing when in the expansionary fiscal policy, just in the opposite direction. Increase in taxes has one more step, but it's basically the same thing. So the one more step is this lowers the take-home income or the available income for them to spend, right? And then that then causes them to spend less. Okay, so this will be like less consumption or that kind of thing. And then it goes on from there. That directly lowers aggregate demand because they do less consumption, which then is also multiplied. The places where they shop, the places where they spend their money, also receive less money, and this will further decrease aggregate demand. Now, when would this policy make sense? Some of you might be wondering, well, why would the government want to lower aggregate demand? Well, they want to lower aggregate demand when there's inflationary pressure. Okay, so so this would be typically in this kind of situation. So okay, so if we're in this situation, I will draw right here. This is our long run aggregate supply. Let's say this is our aggregate demand. This is our short run aggregate supply. Sorry, I didn't draw them this kind of consistently in this time, but that's okay because we're not focused on that part. So at A we have inflationary pressure. So at A we have inflationary pressure. We're above our potential GDP. There's going to be a lot of pressure on prices to go up, and so the government, if they were taking contraction, this would be the time when it would be thought this is a rational policy. They could take contractionary fiscal policy. So this would mean they either lower G or increase T, right? And this is going to decrease aggregate demand. And this is going to lower this inflationary pressure. So right now there's inflationary pressure. If they allow the economy to adjust on its own, we would expect it to end up way up here, right, with a high level of inflation. But instead, they could use this. They could use this contractionary fiscal policy, and that would then shift aggregate demand, and we could shift us back towards this long-run equilibrium, right? So they help it to adjust back to this long-run equilibrium. Oops, sorry, that should be a B. Help it to adjust back to this long-run equilibrium faster, rather than waiting for it to happen on its own, and then we end up with lower inflation, right? So in the case that we end up with a lower inflation than if left alone. Okay, so interesting enough, this contractionary fiscal policy, while it makes perfect sense, it's very rare. So this is very, very rare. So yes, it seems like it would make sense that in times of inflationary pressure, it would make sense for the government to, when the economy is expanded really well and it's above its potential GDP and the economy is really booming, it would make sense for the government to put the brakes on it a little bit by lowering government spending or increasing taxes. In reality, this is quite rare. Typically, in this situation, the central bank will try to fight the inflation with using the interest rate. So they'll raise the interest rate to try to fight inflation. But typically, the government doesn't do this because it's mainly for political reasons. So it's typically not very politically popular to raise taxes, for example. And also, cutting government spending during a time when the economy is doing well would also not be very politically popular. Lots of people wonder why some service they like or something they like is being cut when the government is clearly the economy is clearly doing well, and it won't really make that much sense to them. And raising taxes when the economy is doing well will not make much sense to a lot. Well, people just won't like it. It's not a matter of making sense or not, but people will just be unhappy with it. So the politician that proposes that will be kind of, probably their career will be in some big trouble. Interesting enough, this expansionary fiscal policy is exactly what the U.S. does during recessions, and it's exactly what the U.S. did during the last recession. The contractionary fiscal policy would be more like what you would kind of expect us to be doing right now. In fact, we're not. The kind of interesting thing is you could characterize the fiscal policy over the last 2 years as actually being expansionary fiscal policy. So with the tax changes to lower the taxes, and there's also been some pretty significant increases in government spending. So at a time when the economy is actually probably getting into this range where there could be inflationary pressure, we have been pursuing this policy of expansionary fiscal policy.